Now I'm not muted, right? Well, let's hope for the best. What can I say? I guess this is the co-host. I'll mute the co-host. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, let's try again. Boker Tov. Good morning. Indeed, multitasking. And it's great to be here for the second meeting of Whole of the Bagel. I'm proud to say that our numbers are growing. People were happy. Last week I said, look, we had more than 50 people, and I said, let's see if in the 50th meeting we'll have 50 people, then we'll know that we made something significant, right? But who knows, maybe we'll have 500. You never know, right? So it's great that there are some people who are here in person enjoying the bagels. We already have noted some suggestions slash complaints regarding the lack of non-gluten and non-dairy supplements. This is the time to say that there's always room for improvement, and also that you're welcome to sponsor a Whole of the Bagel lecture, because of those things, if you think about all the costs involved. So for all, we can have champagne and caviar here for all I care, but it's up to the congregation, okay, and especially for those who come regularly. I don't want to take too much time from our speakers' time. Originally, Rabbi Lior Ezrachi Vered was supposed to be here in person, but due to the canceling of flights to Israel by United and Air Canada, she was not able to make it to the United States. We're hoping that she will be able to come to visit us in person, possibly, hopefully, this year or the next year. Rabbi Lior Ezrachi Vered's topic will be, is forgiveness possible? Between Jews and Arabs in the Holy Land. And that topic and Rabbi Lior's work is very important to me, because in fact she is my successor at the Spirit of the Galilee. This is one of the main projects that I was leading, I was involved in when I was still living in Israel, and when I knew that I was going to leave and become the rabbi of Temple Sinai. Two things were sad for me. One is that I was leaving some family and friends and community behind, the personal connections. And the second is that the work of the Spirit of the Galilee, the organization that Rabbi Lior is probably going to be discussing as part of the answer to the question that she's going to be talking to us about, I knew that work, as far as I'm concerned, must continue. So we all worked very hard to make sure that the organization that I founded continues and that the donor base is there. But I knew that I need one component. I need someone who's not as good as me, who's better than me at my old job, in order for that organization and its important work to continue thriving. Immediately, I knew that it should be Rabbi Lior Ezrachi Vered, because she's a very well accomplished Reform rabbi, a leader in Israel in our movement. Not only is everybody, if you're, please mute yourself. If you're on Zoom, please mute yourself. Not only is Rabbi Lior Ezrachi Vered a descendant of a lineage, I think at least 2 or 3 generations, she'll correct me if I was wrong in a second, of Reform leaders who came from this country. Her grandfather was a Reform rabbi who marched together with Martin Luther King back in the 60s, and was very much part of of those struggles that were happening in America back then. And then so was her mother. Her mother was the dean of HUC, where both of us actually went to school in Jerusalem. Rabbi Liora she's stepping out of this job to replace me, the rabbi of Nigun Lev, which is an up-and-coming, very important congregation in the Jezreel Valley in Israel. She is the editor of the new Reform Machzor, the prayer book for the high holidays. She is very, very active in many committees and endeavors, including interreligious, intercultural, interfaith initiatives between Jews and Arabs in Israel. So I hope I covered enough of I know there's so much more going to you, Rabbi Liora, but I don't want to take too much of your time by presenting you. So please, very happy to hand the microphone to you, and maybe all have a very good presentation. Rabbi Lior will be speaking, and we'll be allowing time for questions and answers and a discussion towards the end. So if you have something important that you want to ask or share, make a note and you'll be able to share it later. Rabbi Liora?
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. So yes, as Rabbi John Lennon said, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. I was supposed to be in the United States at this point for a work/family visit, but due to cancellation of flights and just insane costs, I decided to postpone my visit. But I'm so happy that we could meet this way, and I'm seeing you in like 4 different directions. I see the room, I see people, I see underneath people smiling faces. So I feel like we're together, even though we're working through screens. And although COVID was so traumatic for so many people, at least we gain some tools that we can still use and deploy when necessary. So thank you, Rabbi Ol, for that beautiful introduction and for giving me the gift of leading Spirit of the Galilee, which I've been a part of kind of since the early days, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But yeah, just to say that I grew up in Jerusalem. Despite my accent, I only as a child lived in the United States for 2 years, but I've lived nearly my entire life in Jerusalem and now in the north of Israel. And I do come from a rabbinic lineage. And in fact, interfaith dialogue, as Ol said, is part of my DNA. It goes back generations. And this is when I whip out my famous family photo of my grandfather on the right. Of course, Reverend Martin Luther King in the middle, and my grandfather's closest friend, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, I think days or weeks before the assassination of Martin Luther King. So that was kind of like the ethos that I grew up in my family, that we can't see Rabbi Lior on the screen, only the bottom half of the screen. Okay, I don't know how to solve.
We see you. We can see
Yeah.
you, Rabbi. So
Okay.
maybe Leslie will be able to help us here.
Okay, yeah, I can't solve the technical issues. So I really grew up with that ethos of interfaith dialogue and meeting people who are different than us. My mother was, the first woman to be ordained in Israel, and she, I remember as a child, she was part of the interfaith initiative of the World Council of Churches. So she would fly to India or Japan and participate in different interfaith dialogues. Our famous family story is when I was 12, she flew to Rome to meet with the Pope in a big conference, and I broke my leg. And initially they didn't want to tell her, so she wouldn't leave the conference earlier. But then, of course, she figured it out and told the conference, I need to leave early. My daughter has to have an operation. And as she was leaving, the entire conference, led by Pope John Paul II, said a prayer for my health. I am walking, so it must have worked. So interfaith dialogue is really a part of my personal story. And the same year that I broke my leg was the year that the Oslo Accords were being signed. And my mother, who had befriended the bishop, now he's the bishop of the Lutheran Church of the Middle East, Bishop Muni Bunan, took us to Ramallah to celebrate Christmas with the family. And I remember it so distinctly. I don't know many 12-year-olds in Jerusalem who had the privilege of celebrating Christmas in Ramallah in 1994. So really always been a part of what I've wanted to do, but growing up in Jerusalem had many, many challenges, and I never felt that I could live the dream, which was to, first of all, just have Arab friends. That was my initial dream, and to know my Muslim, Christian, Druze, Arab neighbors, in the sense that I can go to their homes and know their children, and they know my children, and we know we're truly friends in the deep sense. And that dream was only realized when I moved to the Galilee. I moved to the Galilee, or the Jezreel Valley, which is kind of the lower part of the Galilee, 7 years ago, as Rabbi Ol said, to take the leadership of the community Nigui Kalev, which is an interesting story in and of itself, but I'll leave it for another talk. And finishing up there after 7 years of being the rabbi there, and really felt that the only reason to leave a community that I love and appreciate was to do the most important work in Israel right now, which is shared society through interfaith, intercultural, and spiritual connections. So that's a little bit about myself. And I made a PowerPoint presentation that I'd like to help to tell the story a little bit of the past year in Spirit of the Galilee, which was actually a joint year for Or and myself, because he started the year and I kind of wove in to the group. So, if you maybe want to say a few words about why you founded this wonderful organization before I kind of jump in, you're more than welcome to.
Well, I wasn't planning on this, but I'll just say that just like you, Rabbi Liora, moving to the Galilee, you know, when you move to a place, it changes you. And although I always lived in Israel and always knew and met and saw and was in relations with people who are Jewish and not Jewish in Israel, the Galilee is a very mixed area. It has about 50% who are Jewish and 50% who aren't. And all are citizens, which makes, with equal rights, which makes it easier than, let's say, in places such as the West Bank, when this is not the case. And they kind of live side by side, though, with certain degrees of integration, but also separated, because it's a different culture, a different language. But in relative peace, that leaves a lot of work to actually integrate the societies. And to answer shortly, just being there, being a rabbi, feeling a mission that my rabbinic work should entail some levels of tikkun olam, and trying to make a society in which we live a better place. It became very apparent to me with time that is the most important thing in Israel, which, as you know, does not especially excel in Jewish-Arab relations. And this is way before the war, okay, but still. So it started with grassroots, really kind of folk-to-folk events and programs that just started spontaneously. And after a while, as more and more of those things happened, because we just saw the great demand and some successes that we've had, I realized that I have to add the ganization to the or, my name, to form an organization, because this is not just about me and my work. This has to be something that is being done in an organized fashion. Luckily, a group of very good people, Rabbi Liora here is one of them, leaders joined me, so we were able to develop this organization. I will not talk about this more, even though I could, and I'm tempted to, Liora, because it's your presentation, but thank you for inviting me to share your words.
Since I have the founder, I felt that we have to hear Mipia Gvura from in the name of the person who founded it, and I will be speaking a lot
George
of
Washington.
Wait, I'm gonna figure out where I can put okay, wait, make sure we see the presentation nicely. All right. Are we all right? Can we see the presentation that I made? Okay. So just to say that what Ol was describing was something that happened very similar to me when I moved to the Jezreel Valley. And I did it also as part of Spirit of the Galilee, but also in kind of parallel activities that my community has been organizing for the past 7 years. And I want to start kind of with the punchline, with the end. I know that for so many Jewish Americans, a lot of what has happened after October 7th is a breakdown of many interfaith relations and pain and maybe disappointment in different interfaith partners that you've had throughout the years. And I want to start with the hope, and I'll get back to the challenges and the difficulties later. But to say that not only have our relationships not been hurt since October 7th, they have gotten stronger. And I'll speak to why, but I want to make sure that everyone's calm and can enjoy the talk and know that I won't say a happy end, but a hopeful end, or a hopeful place that we are now. And the question, is forgiveness possible, is a really, really interesting question. especially now in the month of Elul, when many of us are asking each other, what does it mean to forgive? What does it mean to do real tshuva, to really repent? And I have some interesting thoughts about what forgiveness is and how we do forgiveness. I think a little different than what I used to think years ago, and things are kind of changing now. But I'll kind of weave it as I go along. And for me, this past year, especially, as I was making this presentation, because a lot of times we forget what we've done in a year. But as I was making this, I said to myself, wow, these are actual moments of feeling the divine, of, I sent this presentation to the group of Spirit of the Galilee, and I said to them, I want you to look at this and know that where so much of the world has been in sorrow, in pain, and in violence, you have been healing, love, and repairing of the world. That's what we have been doing as a group, and you need to know this. And it was just nice to be able to say that to them. So first of all, just to say a little about who is part of the Spirit of the Galilee. As Rabbi Ol said, it's a grassroots organization that has been growing in the past few years. It's basically a home for religious and spiritual leaders of all religions in the Galilee. We have a very wide kind of definition of what a religious leader is, mostly to be able to include Arab women in our group, as the Muslim and Christian faiths in Israel are very conservative. Even the Christian groups that have female pastors in the United States will usually not have female pastors in the Middle East, although there are a few kind of early signs that they're coming along. And there's no official position for female religious leaders within the Muslim community in Israel, or as much as I know in the Middle East. So it can be a Muslim. So a lot of the women we have are educators or activists who are also deeply religious, and that's why we don't say you have to be ordained by X or Y or recognized by a specific seminary. And we have Jews and Muslims and Christians and Druze, D-R-U-Z-E. We even have 2 Buddhists. We have a new monk who joined this year, who grew up Jewish, but now is a Buddhist monk. And I would say we have somebody who kind of is half Hindu, you could say. He's an expert in Hinduism, and he definitely sees an interesting story. So we're quite liberal about our definition of who is a religious leader. And we're an egalitarian group. We're one of the few groups in Israel that has men and women together, which means that some people will not join our group. And that is all right, because some people don't feel comfortable being in a mixed group. And for us, it's whoever wants to join the group and sees themselves as a religious leader, communal leader, is more than welcome to join. So we have Jews, secular rabbis, Reform rabbis, conservative Orthodox. We have Christians, we have a Baptist minister, we have a Greek Orthodox minister. In the Muslims, we have different groups. We have Sufis who support us, and so on and so forth. It's very diverse. And we're kind of the core group, we're about 20 leaders, and then we have about 20 or 30 more people who are kind of in and out. We allow people to kind of come into the group and go out of the group. We meet once a month. That was something that all had started, and I joined kind of from the beginning. We started on Zoom because it was COVID. COVID did many, many bad things to relations between Jews and Arabs in Israel, mostly because it kept us all in our small communities and we couldn't reach out. So we started on Zoom, and I'm very happy to say that the group has moved on to meet face-to-face. We meet once a month. We often tour our different villages or towns or religious centers. So here we are sitting in a place called Nebi Shweib, which is one of the centers of the Druze worshiping in the Galilee. And what we try to do is tell the unique story of the Galilee. And I think what's interesting about the Galilee is, I always say the Galilee is what Israel could be if we weren't crazy, all of us. There's something very calming I think part of it is the fact that we're very close to nature. It's the place where Jews and Arabs live in the best state of equality between them. I'm not going to say it's 100% because it's not yet, but it's the closest to bridging the gap of equality, in the sense that many of the Israeli Arabs who live in the Galilee have access to good education, are doctors, are lawyers, engineers, and have had more than almost equal opportunity to kind of equalize standard of living. So I think that's also extremely important to be able to have a kind of joint story. And we live, even though not all cities or towns are mixed, some are. Haifa, Akko, Nofa Galil, which is like a suburb of Nazareth. There are mixed cities, but most of us live in our own towns or kibbutzim or villages, but they're extremely close. So I live in the town of Ramat Yishai, and if I drive 3 minutes down the road, I'll be in the Bedouin town of Manshit Zabda, and another 4 minutes, I'll be in Zelzir. And if I go another 10 minutes, I'll be in Nazareth, which is the big city of where I live. And Shfar'am, another Arab city, is 15 minutes away from me. So the whole area is very mixed between all of the different religions and different faiths. And we have a history of interfaith dialogue. So I brought a story. I'll read it to you from the Babylonian Talmud, from the Tractate of Sanhedrin, which brings an exchange, an interfaith exchange between, I wouldn't call them equals, but certainly two prominent people who actually grew up together. And that's the editor of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, nearly the closest thing we had to a king after the destruction of the Second Temple, who had a very close relationship with Antoninus, who was the Roman emperor. Now, are these real people with real historical influences? We know Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was. Did he actually have a Roman emperor as a friend? We don't really know. But what we do know is that the Talmud thought it was important enough to tell us the story of how they meet together and how they dialogue with each other on religious matters. And this is a chance to thank one of the participants of Spirit of the Galilee, Rabbi Sigalit Or, who taught us these texts in our last meeting and introduced us to this idea that the Galilee was always a place of interfaith exchange. Since the time Judaism and Christianity coming out, and also later with the Romans and with the Muslims, and so on and so forth. So I'll read the text because it might be a little small. Whatever's in bold is the text itself, and whatever is not is the interpretation of Rabbi Dean Steinsaltz. Apropos exchanges with prominent Gentile leaders, the Gemara cites an exchange where Antoninus, the Roman emperor, said to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, "The body and the soul are able to exempt themselves from judgment for their sins." Okay, interesting. Perhaps he's raising a kind of theological question about the balance between our bodies and our souls and sins, and this is, of course, also right for the month of Elul. How so? The body says the soul sinned, as from the day of my death, when it departed from me, I am cast like a silent stone in the grave and do not sin. Okay? And the soul says, the body sinned, as from the day I departed from it, I am flying in the air like a bird, incapable of sin. Actually, we're not going to go into the theological question here, but I think it's actually really interesting. Like, who is responsible for what we do? Is it our bodies, our souls? And when one of them is not here anymore, what happens to our sins and accountability? So great question. We won't go too much into what the answers were in the debate. I more want us to see the relationships between them. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said to him, I will tell you a parable. To what is this matter comparable? It is comparable to a king of flesh and blood who had a fine orchard. And in it there were fine first fruits of a fig tree. And he stationed 2 guards in the orchard, one lame who was unable to walk, and one blind. Neither was capable of reaching the fruit on the trees in the orchard without the assistance of the other. The lame person said to the blind person, I see fine first fruits of a fig tree in the orchard, come and place me upon your shoulders. I will guide you to the tree, and we will bring the figs to eat them. The lame person rode upon the shoulders of the blind person, and they brought the figs and ate them. So first of all, there's what they're showing us, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, what he's showing us with this parable is that body and soul go together. We can't separate the body from the soul. Sometime later, the owner of the orchard came to the orchard. He said to the guard, "The fine first fruits of a fig tree that were in the orchard, where are they?" The lame person said, "Do I have any legs with which I would be able to walk and take the figs?" The blind person said, "Do I have any eyes with which I would be able to see all the way to the figs?" First of all, this always proves my point that the Talmud has a very good sense of humor. You know, they were just like, what? It wasn't me. How could I do it? So what did the owner of the orchard do? He placed the lame person upon the shoulders of the blind person, just as they did when they stole the figs, and he judged them as one. So too, the Holy One, blessed be he, brings the soul on the day of judgment and casts it back to the body, as they were when they sinned, and he judges them as one. Sorry, I need to move things around on my screen so I can see better. Okay. And this goes on, and they have different debates. They even actually have a fascinating debate that I didn't bring here. At what point does a soul enter a body? And since I know it's such a tricky conversation in the United States, less tricky here in Israel, I decided to put that aside. But they have an entire debate of interfaith. He brings his ideas, he brings his ideas. And what's interesting, it isn't just Rabbi Yehuda Nasi proving a point to Antoninus, but it's also Rabbi Yehuda Nasi learning from Antoninus, from the Roman religion. So we have all these stories. This is only one of a few of how people who lived in the Galilee, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, we know, lived in the Galilee. He lived between Tiberias and Bet Shearim, which is actually right where I live. Yeah, he lived in Tiberias and Tzipori, and he was buried in Bet Shearim, which is a 3-minute drive from my house. And we know that all these different religions lived together and knew each other's holidays and were affected and inspired by each other, sometimes in a good way and sometimes in a challenging way. Sometimes these religions would challenge each other. In fact, we have an entire tractate in the Mishnah and the Talmud called Avodah Zarah, and it's not about idolatry worshiping in Judaism. It's how do we live in a multicultural space? Like, what do I do when my Roman neighbor is celebrating a holiday that involves, worshiping the sun god? So we know that the Galilee has always been a home to different religions and different people coming together, meeting each other, hearing about their different traditions and so on and so forth. By the way, if there are questions, please write them down. And once I'm done with the presentation, I'm more than happy to answer. So a little bit about what we were doing before the war. So our group had been meeting once a month and also responding to different events. Sometimes it's local events in the Galilee or in Israel, but oftentimes to events that were happening around the world. So what I put here, and all, of course, you remember this, is a prayer that our group had written in Arabic, Hebrew, and French after a terrible earthquake in Morocco. And we wrote it and put it out. We had different members write out different parts. And it was our way of just showing our caring and our positions as religious leaders worried about people suffering in the world. Okay, and one nice thing that all gave us was a video of our activity, where I'm just going to make sure that we have the sound on as well. Okay. All right, let's see. I'm gonna just move it to YouTube. It'll be easier. So this was a video that was made nearly a year ago as kind of a summary to our, wait, hold on.
Here, there's some problem with.
אחרי האירועים של מאי אמרתי זהו, אני חייבת לחזור לתרום לעיר. גדלתי בעיר שהיה לי יותר חברות יהודיות מאשר ערביות.
ושרפו חנויות, ושרפו בתים שם, ושרפו בתים עם אנשים בתוך הבית. בגלל 5% מהצד שלכם או מהצד שלנו, נשרוף את החיים שלנו והעתיד שלנו.
Judaism is perceived as a political reality represented by ultra-Orthodox voices.
כולנו אור קטן וכולנו אור איתן. חג שמח.
Okay, so I'm just gonna and share. So that was where we were in June 2023, kind of going into July, and we went on our summer break. We often take a break in the summer. And we were supposed to start the year of the upcoming year on the 10th of October. Hold on, for some reason my mouse has disappeared. Where did you go? Very strange. Okay. Everyone can see me now, right? Yes. Okay, sorry. For some reason, my mouse has just gone AWOL. He'll hopefully return at some point. The big question was, how would we move on? How would we start this year? And I think within a day, we were already on a phone call together, thinking about what can we do? How can we help? Even when we actually knew nothing, before we even knew what was going on. And we were supposed to meet on the 10th of October, and obviously that didn't happen. And kind of the first thing we did was call for an urgent call for tolerance and peace, because the biggest thing that people were scared of in the Galilee, besides not knowing what was going on, was that the events of May 2021, I don't know how much you remember what happened. In May 2021, there was this kind of skirmish of violence between Jews and Arabs within Israel. It started because of things that had to do with Al-Aqsa, with the Dome of the Mosque, and it escalated into violence in mixed cities, and it was very, very traumatic and very scary. And we felt that we had to make sure that this does not happen again. So I think days within October 7th, we already published an urgent call for tolerance and peace, where we wrote, "We, men and women of faith, leaders from all religions and denominations, promote a shared society based on interfaith dialogue, mutual respect, and hope for a just and true peace. We are heartbroken from the tremendous suffering and unimaginable cruelty of the events of the last few days, in which thousands of innocent men, women, and children were murdered and are still being killed. Together, we're hurt with all the families and friends who lost their loved ones. Together, we cry out for a quick salvation for all those missing, because at this point, many people were missing and we didn't know where they were. For the immediate freedom of all the captives and for a complete recovery for all the victims. As Jews, Muslims, Christians, and Druze, we all believe that each person was created by God and in God's image. We all believe that the human duty to choose life and to preserve life. We condemn and denounce any use of religion as an excuse and justification for harming a person. Even though we pray in different languages and from different holy books, even though we observe different customs and live in different communities, we are all sons and daughters of this land and wish to continue living in it together in peace and safety and tolerance. Anger and fear are natural emotions, but we must not succumb to them. We must not sink into the poison of revenge and hatred." I don't know of any other group that came out with a similar call anywhere, really. And it was authentic because it came from a group that knows each other for years and trusts each other. I think one of the answers to is forgiveness possible, that I don't know if forgiveness is possible, but friendship is. So this is the flyer for our meeting on the 10th of October, where we were supposed to meet in Kfar Yassif, which has an interesting center of the Druze religion. We will visit them at some point. Right now, it's a little hard to get to Kfar Yassif because it turned into a kavimut, where it's not evacuated from the north, but they're so close and they're bombed nearly every day. So instead of meeting on the 10th, we started doing interfaith prayers, first of all on Zoom, because we couldn't meet. Almost all of Israel was under fire. One of the things that we did immediately after October 7th was visit families who were mourning. I don't know how much this is told outside of Israel, but first of all, the first people who were killed on October 7th by Hamas were Muslims. There were a family of Bedouins in the south who were killed by the bombings. And a lot of times when people ask me, what do Israeli Arabs feel about October 7th? And even though it's a complicated answer, one thing I can say is that many of them felt that Hamas had attacked them as well. Indeed, there are Muslims who are still being held captives out of the 101 hostages. There were Druze and Muslim and Christian soldiers who were killed. I personally went to visit the family of a young man called Awad Daraushe, who was a paramedic at the Nova Festival and was killed as he was trying to save people's lives. So many of us went to comfort the families who had lost here. This is at a Druze family. The men and women sit separately in these events. So we visited each other's families as we were mourning. We not only did we not stop meeting each other, we had more gatherings. So we had conferences and candle lightings over Hanukkah and Christmas. And even Rabbi Ol took two partners, Father Saba Khadj, who was a Greek Orthodox pastor, and Ghadir Hani, who was an amazing Muslim feminist activist, to the United States on a tour, on a speaking tour in January, I think it was. We stayed behind to celebrate Christmas in Israel. At some point, we felt that we needed to add another prayer, and we wrote one in Hebrew and in English and in Arabic to free the hostages. I'll read it in English, but there's a version in Hebrew and in Arabic as well. God, Allah, Hashem, strengthen the hands of those who strive for peace in our region. May they know and feel that they are not alone. Behind them we all stand, people of all faiths, ages, gender, who pray for peace and quiet in our land. May all the hostages return to their homes. We pray for the end of this vicious blood cycle. May this be a land of life to all its inhabitants from here on, and let us say Amen. This is us, the group visiting the Greek Orthodox Church in the town of Iblim. Many times when we get together, we write new prayers. So this is a prayer that we read that was written by one of our newest members, Kifaya Yaiti. She's a Muslim woman from the city of Akko. I'll translate it into English because I didn't have the chance to write it down. Oh God, or oh Allah, Allahumma in Arabic. We ask you to straighten us and guide us on the right path, to change our condition to a better one, to open for us the doors of kindness and prosperity, and to give us forgiveness and welfare in this world and in the next world. Oh Allah, oh God, relieve our sufferings, have mercy on us and our faults, and keep us away from all of the evil and hatred, and grant us success. Dear God, you are peace, and peace is from you. Blessed are you, God of majesty. Maybe I'll be able to read that in Arabic. Allahumma inta salam wa minka al-salam. Okay, that's not good. That's not so bad. My Arabic is getting better. That's one of the nice things that happens with this group, is that my Arabic is improving. This is us in our end of the year conference where we decided to make these little stools together and study together and pray together and build our future together. So we're already planning next week. We'll have our opening session in the village of Shab. And maybe a little bit of kind of like one of our biggest challenges, and then I'll finish up here, and I'd love to open it up to questions. So I think what I showed you is, first of all, between Jews and Arabs who live in Israel and are all Israeli citizens. Once we start talking about Gaza and the West Bank, things change dramatically, and I would not use the same language or the same kind of experiences. But even within Israel, there's a lack of equality in resources. There are power dynamics between the majority and the minority, even in the simplest of things. For instance, all of us speak Hebrew, only most of the Jews do not speak Arabic. And of course, other majority power dynamics that have to do with privilege and the racism in Israel and so on. Trust. Many of us do not trust each other. I always say, when people ask me, what is the elephant in the room between Jews and Arabs? And the Arabs oftentimes will say it's the fact that Jews will not acknowledge our tragedy of 48 and 67 and being displaced from our homes. And that's absolutely correct. I agree with it. The other side is that the Arabs don't always recognize just how scared Jews are. Unfortunately, there have been many cases of neighbors attacking neighbors. Of course, the war going on is a huge challenge. What different people feel. We have people in the group who have children in the military. Not only the Jews, by the way, our Druze members have children in the military. Very complicated dynamics between all of us on that. Another huge challenge is the crime-related violence in the Arab sector and the criminal lack of treatment by the Israeli government, which goes together with an extreme right-wing government that simply doesn't care for Arab citizens. I wish I could say it in a nicer way, but there's no way. And a lot of lack of opportunities for the younger generations in Israel. So here's a link to our website and how to support us. And I already put it in the comments. And let me just
We'll share that.
We'll share it to all of you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would love to answer questions and tell you. And to the question, is forgiveness possible? I think it is, but it doesn't look like what we think it is. It doesn't look like a person going to another person and saying, I'm sorry for what I or my ancestors did. Even though accountability and being able to hear another person's narrative is extremely important. And we need to learn, this is something I say to Israelis, Jews all the time, we need to learn to be able to sit next to different narratives and not have it threaten us. But I don't think that that's exactly how forgiveness happens. I think forgiveness, we don't talk about forgiveness so much in our group. We talk about friendship. We talk about our families. We talk about our children. We talk about our hobbies. We sing together. We pray together. We visit each other's homes. And I think that's the power of the group. That, yes, we can sit and hear narratives and hear difficult conversations, but the basic, most important thing is friendship. And we actually have a lot of humor in our group. That a lot is from O, who's a funny man. I don't know if you noticed that already.
I get my coffee and my bagel in the morning, and I better behave.
That I didn't hear. But humor is a big deal, and it helps. And a lot of them, also the Arab members that we have a good sense of humor, so that helps too. Now the joke is that we're inviting Friar Abuna Saba. He's a Greek Orthodox pastor, and so he and I joke that whoever runs Spirit of the Galilee needs to wear a dress. Wears like a cloak. All right, I'm happy to answer questions and hear from you and responses and thoughts. And sorry, I'm a bit under the weather, so I'm going to blow my nose.
So I'll try to monitor that, also being conscious of the time. It's now 10:24. Is it okay if we run over a little bit? Like, let's say 2/4 of? Is that okay with you? If someone will absolutely have to leave because I don't know what, we'll respect that, but so we have some time for questions. Yes, let's just go around the room from this direction.
So curious, what are the ethics of inheritance? Specifically, do you inherit the debt of your ancestors? And if you do inherit the debt and you don't agree, or vice versa, how can you ask forgiveness for something that you feel, oh, I shouldn't inherit my ancestors' debt?
Are you able to hear the questions, Rabbi? Leora?
Yeah, I think I understood the question. I think that's such an interesting question. Even our even the Bible has different answers. Sometimes it says, Avot achlu boser v'shinei banim tikena. So our forefathers ate bad fruit and our teeth will hurt. But other places it says, I'm blanking on the quote right now, but it says, you won't be punished for the sins of your fathers. So even our own tradition has different.
You're being cut off, Rabbi?
Sorry? Should I repeat myself? Okay. So I said even our tradition has different opinions on this question. Sometimes It's,
Well,
am I having internet
see,
issues? Do I need to change position?
we're having internet issues until a moment ago. I think maybe you may be back now. Can you try to repeat your answer?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so even our tradition has two different views on this matter. At some places it says, you know, the sins of the fathers will be on the children, and in other places it says absolutely not. So we have it in both ways. On a personal level, I think that it's not so much inheriting the sins, but how much can we hold ourselves accountable and how much can we hear other people's pain? Honestly, I can't fix the wrongs of 1948. I can't. I don't have that power. And in the same way that, you know, a nice German my age can't apologize for what the Nazis did. But what we can do is hear each other's stories, and we can, you know, work together and create friendships and learn about each other. And I need to be able to hear that, yes, you know, my forefathers, not personally, because honestly, I can go back to 48 and I can tell you exactly what my forefathers did, and they weren't fighting in combat and so on and so forth. But let's say the Israeli society of my forefathers, they did not good things at all. It was in a war, maybe we can excuse it in different ways, but it wasn't good, and it had terrible outcomes for many, many people. And I need to be able to hear the pain of my friends, even if it makes me feel extremely uncomfortable, and it does. I will often sit and feel very uncomfortable, but that's part of the deal. And they need to be able to hear me. And one thing that I've always said that I'm a Zionist. I've never given up on that identity. I just say that my Zionism means a just and equal society for all. That was the vision of my forefathers when they came in 1911 to Israel. That's on my father's side, not on my mother's side.
So Rabbi Leora, by the way, your internet connection is better, but not perfect.
I'm going to move around a little.
I don't know if there's anything you can do about it. Before, when you were giving the talk, it was excellent. So if you can be in that place.
I didn't move, but I moved now. We'll see. Hopefully,
Unless the Zoom is anti-Zionist, and then that's
sure it is.
any more I know that there are many questions. Let's go, Shelley, please.
What does coexistence mean to you and to the group?
Yeah, I heard coexistence. I don't use that word. I used shared society. That's the word that people who are involved in these kind of organizations use. In Hebrew, we call it chaim meshutafim. And for me, it means first and foremost having friends who are not Jews, who are my neighbors, who I know their families, I know their stories, I know their history. I have visited their homes and eaten their food. That's number one. Second, that's something I wish for my own children. And for me, it means envisioning the Israeli society of 50 years from now, making sure, wait, I'm gonna plug into the internet before I lose my Wi-Fi. Sorry. Making sure that my children have the same opportunities, and that all children in Israel have the same opportunities, even if their name is Muhammad or Yaakov or Jacob or whatever. That for me is a shared society.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go around the room. Herb?
In 2002, I had the pleasure of actually, after being taken out of a line by TSA and searched in front of everybody, put on an airplane sitting next to two young men who were laughing. And it turned out that they spoke in Hebrew, so I asked them if they were Israelis, and they said yes, they're in the electronics industry, which I was on the way to a trade show, but they weren't the type of Israeli I was familiar with because they were Palestinian Muslims who were Israeli citizens. And what we discussed after that, humor made us friends, what we discussed after that is the fact that their parents had stayed in 48 and not fled. And I believe there are 1.2 million Palestinian Muslims who are now the offspring of the people who stayed. And what occurred to me in the discussion is that the Palestinians who stayed for a reason. And it was harder to stay probably in front of these invading armies than it was to leave. And what were their contributions to the state of Israel? Because certainly by staying they were Israelis and they became Israeli citizens. And in 2 visits to Israel since then, and in discussions here, I have still yet to learn, because all of the literature does not discuss this, or the novels or the books written about it, I have yet to learn the Palestinian contributions to the building of the state of Israel. And that's what I think is missing, Rabbi. The fact that we view Israel as a state, as the Jewish state, built by Jews, immigrating Jews from the Arab countries, from Europe, but we never look at Israel as a place where Palestinians existed and stayed and became citizens of the state. So my question for you is, where do I go to find out the contributions of Palestinians to the building of the state of Israel and the contributions they made today? Because that seems to be a voice that's not heard.
That's a really, really great question. I'm not an expert on like where to read these kind of things, but I think any visit to the Galilee, you'll see it. I think the new rector of the University of Haifa is a Muslim woman. If you go to any hospital in Israel, the top doctors are mixed. And if you're in the north of Israel, 80% of your doctors will be Arab. You're the doctors, the nurses, the pharmaceuticals. And first of all, it's 2 million. I think it's 2.1, not 1.2 Israeli Arabs or Palestinian Israelis. Different people call themselves in a different way. And they're in, and the past 20 years, we've seen a huge surge of Israeli Arabs in the media, in culture, in medicine, in high tech now. We hosted in our community a young man and woman who started the first high tech area in Nazareth. In business, we had a connection with this wonderful woman called Julia Zar, who owns the best trina company in Israel. It's like award-winning trina. And she started the sorry, you said it with the accent. And she started the first Arab philanthropic trust. So amazing people doing amazing things all over Israel. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, but there really are still bad connection.
Sorry, I'm not moving.
Let's get
it's
over
just,
there.
you know.
Could be hour, and who knows? Let's try for a few more minutes. Yeah, Nancy.
So I wanted to ask a question of how is there coordination of other communities within Israel? Is there an effort towards that of groups that are doing maybe not as much as you're doing, but doing some and have a desire to do more?
This question I need to be repeated. If you can repeat it, thank you.
So is there a coordination with other groups or communities in Israel who are doing similar work, and is there a desire to do more?
Yeah, I think so. I know that the Reform movement in Israel has been funding communities that want to do more of interfaith work or shared society initiatives. What we need is a lot of financial support, because you would think the Israeli government would say, oh, these people are doing amazing things, let's support them. We want Jews and Arabs to get along. We don't want them to fight. But no, they don't. So there's minimal support from the government to go forward in these kind of ventures. So a lot of it has to do with kind of support and funds. But there are so many organizations. Just this month, I was invited to like 3 different conferences, which I couldn't even go to, on shared society in mixed cities. And there are many
it's always good to blame the other, but it's actually, so Jamie just wrote to us that it's It's actually Temple Sinai's internet connection that's problematic, something for us to work on. Liora, are you with us still?
Yes, I hear everything.
We understand now that it's our internet connection that is problematic. But the question that was asked is not about support. It was about coordination with others. But it's very important to answer. It's very important to answer that question as well. Let's try again. Let's give it a shot.
Mm-hmm. So there is some coordination. There are lots of different organizations doing good things all around. I don't know of like one umbrella organization that kind of puts everything together. But there's certainly like locally. So I work with a lot of the local groups. Our regional council in the Jezreel Valley did a roundtable a few months ago, which brought together all of the different initiatives and groups doing shared society work together. And it was wonderful. First of all, because lots of connections came out of it and we've already done things together. But it has to do with, you need some big organization to kind of help you. And the best would be the government or the local government. But since the Israeli government will not do something like this, it has to fall on local government. And local government, it really depends on the local government. So the Jezreel Valley Municipal Council is really a visionary on this thing, and it's really important. Other local governments may not. It depends.
Let's take one more question. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Good morning, I'm David. One thing that struck me about the video that you shared was the gentleman saying that something about the reality is that it's the political reality is that it's a Jewish state. He said something to that effect. I don't remember exactly the words. And I don't know religion person, but I think that's maybe an interesting perspective, assuming the person was a non-Jew. Then, it feels like it's almost acquiescing to living inside a Jewish state and accommodating themselves to it. So my question is, what do you think the limits of this shared society might be inside a Jewish state, as opposed to a secular, what it might be inside a secular state?
Mm-hmm.
What limits does being a Jewish state place on this shared society?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the man who wrote is Pastor Yochanan, who's an evangelical pastor in Nazareth, who writes beautiful commentary on the Psalms. So just to know who he is. Yeah, well, first of all, I think something that maybe people don't know enough, I would say that the majority of the Israeli Arabs who live within Israel accept that they live in a Jewish state. They accept it as a fact, maybe not necessarily as something they want, but they don't necessarily want to fight it, and many of them appreciate it as well and see the Jewish state as a good thing. I was actually at a lecture of one of the senior correspondences on Arab society in Israel, Eran Zinger, and he said that the bottom line is that most Israeli Arabs look around the Middle East and they realize that they live in a healthy country for the most part, where they have running water and electricity. It was a very hot night in summer, and he said, the fact that we can sit, with excellent air conditioning and hear this lecture is something that won't happen in many Arab countries. So there is that. On the other hand, there are limitations of, living as a minority in a majority country. The language is a limitation. It also depends on the government. We've been living under very right-wing extreme governments for the past 20 years. Different governments might be acting differently, would have more respect for the fact that there's a minority living in Israel. The fact that the public sphere is mostly Jewish and we act on a Jewish calendar obviously has limitations for Muslims and Christians who live in Israel, in the same way that you as Jews who live in a more Christian country do. And the biggest question is, can we really live in a Jewish country that has the ability to hear the narrative of people, indigenous people who have been living here for generations? Many Jews have also been living here for generations, but they have a different story than we do. And, their forefathers have been here for as long as mine and maybe even longer. And I think the biggest problem in Israel on the Jewish side is that we don't hear these, we cannot hear these stories, not me personally, but so many Israelis, their hearts are closed to hear it right now. Now, I can understand it. We're hurting desperately right now. We were attacked by people who used to work, some of them even worked in our kibbutzim. Okay, we're even this morning, I don't know how many of you knew that we had very dramatic missile attacks this morning in Israel, in the north and in the center. We're constantly fearing for our lives. So it's very hard to be able to, you know, open our hearts to hear somebody else's narrative that is threatening to our own. But if we have any way forward, that's what we need to do. And it can be done without giving up your own story. Not mine and not theirs.
So since we need to wrap up, I'll say that to me it's an unbelievable experience to hear the kind of presentation that I would used to give, done better by someone else.
No.
And well, you know, a lot of things. The Talmud story, that's an upgrade, and you being and you being there is an upgrade. Just to say that from my perspective of being here right now, I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is that Rabbi Lior Verd Ezrahi and her friends are heroes, because you know she's sitting there talking to us about how they write letters of reconciliation and meet and go in each other's communities and visit and talk about peace and shared society and all those things where missiles are falling on their heads and the country is in the state of war. You need a lot of courage and a lot of very high moral ethics to be able to speak this conversation, which is often more complicated than they're at fault, you're at fault. You know, it's like kind of like being able to rise up above it and see the bigger picture, acknowledging just that, not just your own people's pain, but the others. You need to be very, very strong to do that. And what they're doing is amazing. The other thing is, if you notice that when you hear Rabbi Lior speak from the grounds, from northern Israel, you realize that it's much more complex there than the Jews and the Arabs, or the Israelis or the Palestinians. There's so many, just like here, if you say the United States, what is it? 400 million people and 500 million stories, right? At least. Just like there's so many nuances. There's how many people know that Muslims are also fighting in the IDF, or that, or that, just like your very good comment and question, Herb, there's so many Arab Israelis or Palestinian Arab Israelis who are much of Israel's story and have done so much for its prosperity and existence. There's so many different nuances, and it's always good to hear someone from the ground. And sometimes since I came here, I went to meetings at Federation and heard a lot of smart people talking about Israel, but not always caring to even ask the Israelis in the room, how do they feel, okay? And I just want to say one more thing, is I think that this kind of talk that is coming from the eye of the storm can be inspirational to us in more than one way. One, I think we have a lot to learn from those people about the conversation about Israel and Palestine and the war. I think they're more advanced in that than we are in many ways, because they're really there and they're feeling it. We should listen. We should listen and ask for their leadership. Another thing is, when I moved from the Galilee that is divided between Jews and Arabs to Rochester, I learned that Rochester is also divided. Right? There's a river that runs through Rochester, and I've been asking people at Temple Sinai, how many of you know people who live on the other side, are friends with them? Usually the answers are 0, 1, 2. There are exceptions, but that's usually is the answer. You can even take a poll around the room here, but we don't have time. So sometimes it's easy for us to kind of deflect and talk about Israel and the Middle East and the war there with Iran and all those things. And we should, because we care for Israel and we want it to succeed. But have we solved all those kind of problems in the city of Rochester, New York? Have we already bridged all the gaps? As far as I know, such a group such as Lior is leading now, of interfaith leaders, does not exist right now. People tell me it used to be, we used to have, there's some things, and it exists to a point, but I haven't, I'm here for 3 months, I haven't Maybe I'm just not invited, but I haven't been, could be, but I haven't seen it yet. Personally, I still need to see it. And even if there's one, there could be 10 groups like that, you see? And the last, so that is something for us to think, not just talking about Israel and that war, also as a mirror to our society here in the United States. What are we doing that is like the spirit of the Galilee in Israel? I think that is something that we as Temple Sinai and the broader Jewish community and the broader community in our region have something to yet. There's a room for improvement in that front as well. Okay, and I will say, Lior, if you want to, let's see if the gods of Zoom will allow. And then my next conversation with our executive director, Mary, is how do we improve the internet in this room? If we're going to have more interesting speakers talk to us from all sorts of parts of the world, sometimes you need to make sure that we're able to hear them. As I think that, Lior, I'll just say that thank you. Very inspirational to hear you. To see myself in your video is kind of hilarious. And then also that my congregation has had a glimpse of my previous life in the Galilee. I hope that Rabbi Vered Ezrachi will be able to visit us sometime in person, and that our social action committee and our entire body of wonderful people, hundreds of households where Temple Sinai and the greater Jewish community will be able to have a relationship with Rabbi Liora, because what she does in Israel, at least in my opinion, is inspirational, and we can learn from it, we can collaborate, and we should support it. So we'll also share the link for the Spirit of the Galilee website.
Yeah, and you can give my email and my Facebook page. This is what living here is like. There's an F-35 flying over my head right now. But just to say that I think, the best way is to visit if and when possible. And just to, we'll take you, we'll introduce you to everyone. And that's the best way to.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll visit Lior and all her friends in the Galilee. All right, thank you everyone. Thank you, Lior. We'll be in touch. The next speaker of Follow the Bagel next week is myself. We'll be continuing with a Slichot agenda. It will be actually a spiritual approach of the Kabbalistic book of Zohar about Slichot. The gates of tears are never closed. That's the name of the lecture. So it'll be more of a Jewish studies, because we're approaching Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The one after is about the shofar by Ilan Adar. So we have a whole mini-series within the series that has to start with Lior's talk, and we'll have different aspects of forgiveness and speaking of. So have a great afternoon. Take a bagel home if you need to. And see you next week, God willing. Thank you for everyone who was on Zoom as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.